unexpected treat for you today. Welcome to Outlaw Bookseller with me, Steve Andrews. Hi there. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff, because the channel needs the views. And I've done a couple of shelf tour videos recently, and I wasn't planning to do this for ages, but I decided to film some stuff today, so I had to move everything, because if you follow the channel, you'll know that I have quite a small house, and it's difficult to fit everything in. But as I moved stuff, I thought, well, I may as well, you know, give the guys and gals a treat and show them what we have here. So it's a shelf tour, and today we're going to look at, what are we looking at? We're looking largely at Demy format hardcovers. I'm going to try and put this part of the collection into more context. Quick bit of film of some other areas of the hideout, and that's my interesting shelves. And here's quite a few of my SFA format books, which you'll see in other videos. And this stuff is always in a state of flux. It's always moving around. And down the bottom here at the moment, I think that's mostly octavo fantasy and horror and a few anthologies. And yeah, I know you want to see the book covers or the spines, but it's all about space in my world. It's that simple. So if you have a look at me sort of putting a new shelf in on a video a while ago, you'll see that and what have you. And up above the main Demy and Royal format SF hardcovers section, we have all this other stuff piled up. I read all sorts of things. This is just a small part of it. There's a lot more downstairs. There's stuff under the bed, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on and on. Because if you're a reader, you're a reader. And if you want to get anywhere with really understanding and appreciating SF, you have to read other stuff as well. You can't do it in a bubble. Here are two circa 93, 94 omnibus editions of Elric and Merlin by Michael Moorcock in the old Millennium imprint, and I bought these at the time. And these are not editions I'm particularly fond of. I don't really like the cover art. I do like the way that the individual stories are noted on the front, but there's no contents pages. Now these are in Royal format, which is the largest format as a standard used for hardcovers, so that just goes to show you. And we're mostly going to be looking at Demys. I'll just put this Alfred Bester here, which is smaller, as you see, so it's Demys we're looking at. Why have I got the Moorcocks there? Well, I was rereading part of The Sleeping Sorceress, and I'm thinking of moving these on and replacing them with the new sort of Gallery Saga editions. But I don't know, it's hard to tell what I'll do. So they're in the way, but they just give you some context. Let me move those out the way. The eagle-eyed amongst you, or you, those of you who've been with the channel for a while, will have seen a lot of these before. I've used this shelf to shoot before, and I've shot parts of my Isaac Asimov collection, my Ballard collection here. So these will be familiar, but we'll have a quick look in here and just zip through these things. A bit of Aldish here in the corner. There's an Angela Carter at the top there. You see, and this is the thing, it's always in a state of flux. There's always a lack of room. And even though I've recently sold a load of stuff at Hay on Wye, it's racking up again. But we'll just show you some Bryans. I mean, something to look at. This is a nice little series, the Good Child SF Alternative series. I'll just zoom back a bit there. And they needed 6 of these. Hothouse. They did Zelazny's This Immortal, Paul and Cornbluth's Space Merchants, John Crowley's Beasts. They did an A. Van Vogt, I think it was The World of Null. And what was the other one? There's another one as well. I'm going to have a look inside the book. I've got 3 of them. This is going to be one I've got. And let's see. Tiger Tiger by Alfred Bester, which most of you know as The Star's My Destination. I prefer the original Blakean British title, Tiger Tiger. So these are good. And some of these are actually in print literally a few years ago. The Zelazny and I think it was the Paul and Cornbluth. And I was selling them at $8.95 a pop in my shop. And certain dealers were doing it for a lot more. Naughty. But they're gone now, that's the thing. So yeah, a bit of Aldish, I'm always very keen on. Poole Anderson, I did an unboxing of this lovely Merman's Children. I think it was early on in the days of the channel. That's a lovely fantasy novel, really nice, from Berkeley Putnam. And there is a video showing pretty much all of these Asimovs here, which is the way to go. And they're in my beloved Granada and Grafton, one of my favourite imprints of all. And they really are very beautiful. I can't resist feasting my eyes on these. Look at that, Pebble in the Sky. There is a Sphere edition of Pebble in the Sky I'm after, which is a paperback, and it uses the same typography as the Granada Grafton ones, and I haven't seen it for years. So you pick it up. I do love that title, I have to say. First of the Galactic Empire novels, of course. And there's some ballads here, and I've covered these in one of my ballad videos. And there's some other things. I mean, somebody who I really love, and I'm trying to sort of complete my collection. I think I'm 2 books short now, and they're very uncommon, is Barrington J. Bailey. We're getting the Glare Factor here. And that's one, Alison Busby, The Annihilation Factor. I've not actually read this one. I've been holding it back for years till I'm really in the mood, because, you know, he's dead sadly, but, you know, the father of dark British space opera, along with M. John Harrison. So if you like people like Alistair Reynolds, those sort of guys, you know, go back to Barrington, because he's a man. And I know Matt at Science Fiction Reads. Hi Matt. Matt Defoe has read some Bailey, and he's absolutely fantastic. Great stuff. So there you go. And a bit of Greg Bear there, Blood, Music and Eon. And there's another one of those good child books, the SF Alternatives, not SF Masters. And there's Tiger in hardcover. Look at that. Lovely plain typography. Beautiful. They don't make him like that anymore, sadly. They've all got really good introductions as well. People like David Wingrove. They're very good books. If you ever see any of them, snap them up. So there we go. So that's the top shelf there. And as you see, apart from that Erin D'Angelo Carter, there's nothing in front there at the moment. So I've actually do have some space, because the rest of this, as you will see, is double layered, because that's the way we roll, and that's the only way we can do it. Because of lack of shelf space, lack of space generally in this Berg, and, you know, the sort of fact that one keeps acquiring things and get rid of things, it's always in a state of flux. So there is a kind of logic there, but but it is rather hard to fathom sometimes. I mean, these sort of Penguins and various sort of modern classics there, they're just because I don't have anywhere to put them at the moment, so they're kind of living there filling that gap. But I say this is mostly Demy, SF and associational. So there are some things here which are fantasy, some other things here which are mainstream fiction, but they are associated with these writers. I pulled most of the pure mainstream novels out of here and have tucked them away in a corner, simply because it's just given me more room for the SF. So we'll have a look, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the front layer, then I'm going to pull it up and show you the back layer, and we'll keep doing that and we'll get there eventually. So just to have a look what we got here. Angela Carter, Magic Toy Shop in Virago, her best early novel, important associational writer for New Wave SF. Really nice laminated boards, beautiful. I've got a mug with this on as well. And recent acquisition, Puffin Clothbound Little Prince, the French children's science fiction novel. Famous book, never read it. I have read his other work, so I could get that under my belt at some point. A few more sort of penguin clothbound here. People go mad for these. I mean, I like some of them, but I don't think they're always that great. This is Day the Triffage, which you don't see so much as the others. Really, really nice. One of the 3 or 4 copies I've got of Triffage, and one of my favourite books, obviously. So that's those there. And we'll have a look at what we've got here. Well, Alfred Bester, Tender Loving Rage in Tafford, which was a thriller, which wasn't published till the early 90s. We'll have a quick look at it. I'm a Bester completist personally, and I've only read this once, but it was really good and it had a very sort of Hollywood-esque climax. You could see it as a Hitchcock film, and yeah, exciting stuff. Lovely, lovely job. Next to it, a book which does really take me back to buying books in London in the early 80s, and this is Gollum to the Power of 100. Of course, people say the title's Gollum 100, but it's Gollum to the Power of 100. So, you know, as you see, it's a mathematical thing. And this is Simon & Schuster. This is a first. I got this from the shop on Charing Cross Road. Now, it was either called Fantasy Inn or Fantasy Centre. I remember it as being Fantasy Inn, but I could be wrong. But you'd go in there and there was a sea of yellow spined door paperbacks. It was quite remarkable. And you'd look at them and you'd think, who the hell are these authors? And it was all these obscure people, most of them were much cop, but there's the odd gem. And I got this there then, and it was marked like that even then, but it'd been out of print for a while. And there's Alfie on the back, bless his heart. Great stuff. This to me is the finest of Bester's later works, and it is a wonderful conceptual breakthrough in the very last word of the book, and that flips everything round. Marvellous. Really is great. Do like that a lot. Excellent stuff. So going back down the shelf, we have all sorts of other things. That's The Secret Ascension by Michael Bishop. That's American tour first. In the UK, that's called Philip K. Dick is Dead, Alas, and there's been a paperback version of the States since then as well. And that's a novel with PKD as a character. Jerry Beeson, Ray Bradbury, the wonderful Scott Bradfield. If you haven't watched Scott's channel, Scott Bradfield, hi Scott. It's good for SF, general fiction, everything. What a well-read and funny man he is, my inspiration. Now, Anthony Burgess. Recently I read somewhere in something, and it was something written by, it was John Sutherland, who's supposed to be a literary critic and expert in literature, and he said in something that Anthony Burgess only wrote one science fiction novel, and that was Clockwork Orange. He didn't write one, he wrote 4, and this was the 4th one, and this only appeared in this form recently, and this is Puma, which is the SF strand from his early 80s novel The End of the World News. And as I understand it, he wrote Puma, and basically he had to build the rest of the novel around it. It's got a tripartite structure, The End of the World News, and I have read it. I read it way back. I don't have it in my collection anymore. And it's basically a worlds collide situation where there's a planet which in The End of the World News is called Lynx. In this is called Puma. It's heading towards Earth, and Earth is going to be destroyed. And this Manchester University Press started doing this collection recently of some of the more sort of obscure Burgess works, and I read at least 30 of his books, and I was a huge fan. And it's really great, beautiful stuff. And I do have another one here, which is more of a sort of posthumous sort of fantasy. This is Beard's Roman Women, and I've always wanted to read this. I bought it when it came out a year or two ago. I'm waiting for the right moment to come, and the penguin of this is super uncommon, so yeah, looking forward to that. So yeah, a bit of Burgess there, a bit of associational mainstream. And we see some William Burroughs, who I want to talk about again. Those are firsts, very important to me. Calvino. Orson Scott Card in Tor, Speaker for the Dead. Haven't read this for years. That's the US first edition. Look at that, isn't that lovely? Beautiful. Just going to show you the cloth underneath, actually. I've got two jackets on this one. I don't know how that happened, but it's got 2 jackets. And yeah, look at that. Quarter bound. Really nice. Excellent stuff. So I have read this, but a long time ago. I never read Xenocide, the 3rd one. Some of his fantasies, sure. I mean, the 80s is a key time for me, and a lot of these books came out in the 80s, and they have memories beyond themselves. They have associations for me. And this is Jonathan Carroll, Sleeping in Flame. Carroll, somebody you never hear much about these days. Legend, very interesting, sort of surreal, fabula writer. And yeah, Cut Above, interesting guy. Never really put a nail through my heart, but they are interesting. So, and that's Sleeping in Flame. There's a very uncommon edition of this which has errors in it, and that's the true first. So this is like the one which wasn't withdrawn. This is a later one. So there you go. But absolutely beautiful. More Angela Carter, Susie McKee-Charnas. Here's a book you don't hear much about, and the film is a real cult film, and that's Parichesky's Altered States, which I think is fantastic. And it was made into a film by Ken Russell, SF film, about hallucinogenics, and absolutely marvellous. This is a Hutchinson first. I bought this in Hay-on-Wye about 30 years ago, something like that. Absolutely fantastic book. And if you've seen the film and not read the book, try and get hold of the book, because they are different, and the key sequence, what I would describe as the transformation sequence, is very different in the book and well worth reading. So there you go. Something that's been hard to get hold of, this little series that Penguin did. I say hard to get hold of. You don't see them much in bookshops. This is one of them. This is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And they're just sort of plain sort of boards. And they did one of Neuromancer. They did one of Stranger in a Strange Land. And I think, not The Dispossessed, Left Hand of Darkness maybe, I can't recall. They're quite hard to come by. They're quite nice. They are rather overpriced. Penguin Galaxy, they're called. But you know, one would like a proper sort of tie-in edition in hardcover, but you know, they cost the earth as they do, so you know. Ellison and Christopher Evans. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this up on the next shelf and try and show you what's behind. The good thing about shooting at this level is I can have a sit down, which is great. So right, here we go. Shelf 2 at the back. What have we got? Well, this Aries 1, this was actually in my last shelf tour video, which not my last one, the first one I put up in this series, and it was over with the Octavo, so it's moved because it shouldn't be there, so I'll show it you again. Beautiful. David and Charles, you know, good solid regular non-fiction publisher. Even they did a bit of SF. Everybody used to do SF. It was part of the mainstream, you see, back in those days, 70s, 80s, and a few more bits and pieces, a bit of horror there. So what have we got? Arthur C. Clarke, Fountains of Paradise, Golax. Never actually read this one, and yeah, I got that a little while ago, and I think that was about 10 quid. And you see this book online in terrible condition, stupid prices, and you know, if you look around you can get a nice one. Isn't that beautiful? Lovely job. And of course this is from the days when Golax didn't do any pictorial jackets, so it's a real treat. That lovely. So there you go. And my beloved DG Compton, great stuff. Michael Coney, fantastic, really great. You know, Coney, I mean, this is a good one. If you like Hothouse by Brian Aldiss, or if you also like Non-Stop by Brian Aldiss, this is like a combination of the two, really. This is The Ultimate Jungle by Michael Coney in Millington, short-lived British imprint of the 70s. Nice plain jacket. I love that typeface. And Coney's got this real adolescent thing going on, which I've mentioned before. I love it. His characters are always sort of like boiling over with, you know, their sort of crushes and stuff. But I really love it. It's a real mark of his unique style. Nobody else does that sort of thing like him. I'm aware we're getting some glare again because behind me is a window. That's the thing with this house, it's very light. I'll show you another of the SF alternative series, John Crowley's Beasts, which is masterful. And this is the Crowley I've enjoyed the most. He is a writer I've struggled with. I want to reappraise him at some point. I've acquired new copies of his more famous books in Golax Masterbooks. This is probably the least famous of his early celebrated books, but I really like it, and it's really quite something. And it's about sort of animals raised to the sort of intelligence level of human beings, and it's fantastic stuff. I've just spotted something which is completely unrelated in a way to the SF here, and that's Diva by Delacorte. Delacorte is a pseudonym for Daniel Odier, a French literary writer who did a book-length interview with William Burroughs called The Job. And if you've never seen the film Delacorte, great French thriller from the early 80s, marvellous. And there's a series of about 6 of these, and I used to have them all in these lovely Allen Lane hardcovers, and I got rid of some of them purely because of space. And they're great fun. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, great sort of labyrinthine, witty sort of crime novel, exceptionally cool. And that's a film tie-in jacket as well. One of them is an SF novel, one of the later ones. It's got quite a cyberpunk feel, but I can't think for the life of me which one. But there you go. So, and then of course we come on to some PKD. Now I got into PKD in about 76. So, you know, it was only a few years later that he died, and we started to see a lot of his mainstream novels appearing. Mary and the Giant, The Broken Bubble in Milton Lumpke territory, which is one of my favourites, I must say, and that's a Golax one. That's a great book. I do love his mainstream novels as well. They're like the SF. They vary. Some are better than others. That's one of the best ones. My personal favourites of the mainstream novels are that one and Puttering About in a Small Land, which I have a paladin of somewhere. Really, really great stuff. They're lovely. And what else do we have? That's the first of The Man in the High Castle, which was given to me by one of my old customers in Germany. I've told the story elsewhere. Probably my second favourite Dick novel is this, Martian Time Slip, and the SF Master series from New English Library. These are really hard to get in good nick. Bruce Pennington cover. This was the second PKD I read. I read it in paperback with the same livery, and this is just such a wonderful, wonderful book. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to do a video just about that at some point, because it's sort of not underrated in his canon, but it's one that people don't talk about as much as they do, say, Three Stigmata or Ubik, and it's great. And that's the UK first of Ubik there. And there in front of you can see the 5-volume Golax first thus editions of the collected stories of Philip K. Dick. When I went to Wilcon in 87, Underwood Miller, you could get copies of the True First, which is a slipcase set, no jackets. They had the Acts of Paul on a separate slip of paper in them, which is the one bit of Philip K. Dick fiction I don't own. I have read it. It's really just a synopsis. But I went for these, and, you know, I like Dick short stories, but they never really do it for me in the way the novels do. Some of them are really good, it has to be admitted, but to me they're nearly all dry runs for the novels, really. Thomas M. Dish. Here's an interesting one, which I haven't shown you. It's George Alec Effinger, When Gravity Fails. A book that was talked about a lot in the late 80s, and Ellison used to go on about it, and there was quite a buzz around it. Sort of like a Middle Eastern cyberpunk book. And there's There's George there, looking very Middle Eastern, and absolutely beautiful. Look at that. It's Arbor House. There's some lovely books, Arbor House. Really, really beautiful. And that's the first. Nice. And in the corner here, Harlan Ellison. I'm still yet to do my Harlan video, so I kind of want to keep those hidden away from you until I can be bothered. So let's move this Christopher Evans out of the way. There's a load of Harlans there. All firsts, what have you. What have we got up above? There's a John Fox and a Mary Gentle. So there you go. So as you see, this is pretty indicative of my taste, actually. This shelf here is mostly fairly literary stuff. It's about 50-50 British and American, and, you know, very, very much geared towards the new wave end of things. The real sort of surprise there in terms of my taste for most people who know me well would be the Arthur C. Clarke, actually. I mean, he's somebody I'm interested in, but I don't think it's front rank. But, you know, Compton, Coney, Crowley, Dick, Ellison, Dish, that's very, very much me, it has to be said. Third shelf. Front level, we've got a bit of Farmer there in the corner, and we have, I love this cover, Mary Gentle, Golden Witch Breed, which looks like a fantasy novel but is an SF novel. Absolutely beautiful, really great. First Golax, really hard to get it in good nick. Lovely book, very happy memories of selling this, particularly in A format. I think it was Arrow, and I love that title. Great stuff. She's British, still writing, new book out a little while ago. Bit of Bill Gibson there. And this, of course, is the definitive steampunk novel, The Difference Engine. This is signed by both Bill and Bruce at different times. Never met them together, met them separately each time. And that's there, and great stuff. I need to reread that because it's been a long time. A bit of Stephen Gregory. If you don't know who Stephen Gregory is, do watch my video, The Avian Macabre of Stephen Gregory. Great English writer who basically writes very sophisticated horror fiction set in Wales a lot of the time. Fantastic stuff. Bit of fantasy then, Colin Greenland. Colin Greenland, wonderful critic of New Wave, and won the BSFA, I think it was, for a book called Take Back Plenty, which was the second big space opera after Consider Phoebus that sort of began the new radical hard space opera trend, which I regard as revisionist and unnecessary, but it is a great fun book. This is one of his fantasies from Unwin, Other Voices, very elegant, beautiful, subtle book. There we go. Harry Harrison, my beloved M. John there, with a bit of Vericonium, and probably one of the finest books I've ever read, one of the finest short story collections ever, The Ice Monkey by M. John Harrison. Superb, absolutely brilliant. And more of Mike's stuff there. Then, you know, to his horror, he would see he's right next to Robert Heinlein. And I'm not a massive Heinlein fan. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I like Puppet Masters. I like Orphans of the Sky. There's not much else I do like, if I'm honest. But he is redolent of a certain time for me. His books are always around. And, you know, these NEL ones are hard to come by, and they're really nice. And there's The Moon is a Harsh Mattress, as my friend Graham says. And I Will Fear No Evil, which I, even at 13, found prurient. And there's a couple of the later ones there, which I bought purely for sort of, you know, mythic resonance. Sean Hudson, the Schlockmeister, great guy, Sean, absolutely fantastic man. Met him once and we went for a meal in a Italian restaurant in Bristol. This is back in 1986 with a couple of guys from a wholesaler and the rep from W.H. Allen, his publisher then. And Sean and I burbled away happily about heavy metal and our favourite zombie films and serial killers, to the horror of everybody else around. We had a great time and it was great fun. Really, really nice guy. Only met him once. I wish I could have met him again. Lovely, lovely guy. And underrated as a writer. He delivers. And a few more other bits and bobs there. K.W. Jeter. I've got so much time for K.W. Jeter. This is Wolf Flow, which is... I've got terrible glare on the camera, so I can't actually see what the picture's like. That's marvellous. A palindromic title, Wolf, and then Flow, which is, of course, Wolf backwards, and that's amazing. Really abrasive, hard, merciless stuff. I mean, K.W. Jeter was cyberpunk before there was cyberpunk, and, you know, he's just fantastic. I mean, the general critical consensus is that what he's really good at is SF, but his science fiction is astonishingly good as well. Marvellous stuff. And he's in sort of similar to him then, a ballpark there. You have Richard Cadry and Mark Laidlaw, who sort of really came in the wake of people like him and Gibson, really. Great stuff. Shelf 3, rear level. And what do we have? Well, it's what's hiding up here. Hold on a moment, we'll have a look now. And there you go. Ender's Game. Orson Scott Card. Very nice, very clever book. And this is Tor. And I think this is a first. Let's have a look. I think the true first was a limited or something like that, but we'll have a quick squint inside now, because I generally tend to have firsts, me. I don't really go for reprints. Let's see. Okay, so it's a revised edition, first thus. The first edition was 85, so this is a first thus of the revised edition. See, the number line has a 1, which means it's the first printing. It's a revised edition, so a second edition, first thus. So there you go. Very, very good. And of course it began as a short story, but lovely book. Really, really nice. I do like Tor. Do a lovely job. And as you can see, that's a royal. So that should be in another part of the room, but it's tucked under here again for reasons of space. So, and just to show you the very eclectic nature of the Outlaw Bookseller, what have we got here? The Penguin Book of Italian Short Stories. There you go. Not just a sci-fi fan, as they say. I never say sci-fi. That was a rare lapse. Why do I never say sci-fi? Because it isn't sci-fi. Sci-fi is a journalistic pejorative term. You shouldn't use it. It's not nice. You should say SF, because it can mean science fiction, structural fabulation, don't laugh, or it can also mean speculative fiction. Bit of Tolkien there, which I've acquired recently, purely for study, nothing else you understand, not for enjoyment, just study. And looking down, what have we got? Good, solid, new wave literary SF. Langdon Jones, Anna Kavan, the very wonderful Lee Kennedy. What a lovely person Lee is. She's a great lady. Small oeuvre, perfectly formed. This is Wind Angels, limited trade edition from PS. Her only book that's come out this century. She has other things unpublished. I wish somebody would issue them. Fantastic. She's such a nice person. She's lovely. Texan SF and general fiction writer. Brilliant, brilliant. Good old friend. I haven't seen her for years. I would like to see her again. I haven't seen her for nearly, gosh, I think 2006 was the last time. I must sort of try and make an effort to see her. Gary Kilworth, marvellous stuff. Gary can write anything. Really talented man. Science fiction, fantasy, horror, kids books, you name it. Historical fiction, general fiction. He hit this real sort of stride in the sort of late 80s where he wrote some amazing general fiction. And this is one of his books, In the Hollow of the Deep Sea Wave from Bodley Head, with Hockey-Sized Wave on there, or at least a rip-off of it. Great stuff. And he has a new book coming from Newcon Press, which is great. And next to that, there's a little cat book. And Smudge the cat is around summer. She's never here when I want her, so you can't see how cute she is. This is The Wild Road by Gabriel King, which is, of course, M. John Harrison and Jane Johnson. Voyager editor, editor of George R.R. Martin, novelist in her own right, also known as Jude Fisher, fantasy writer. And she has been looking after Tolkien's legacy in Unwin and then HarperCollins as long as I've known her, since 89 and before that. And this is a book they wrote together. And it's still in print as an ebook in the States, and it's still delivering royalties, apparently, so she said, on social media. So there you go. Bit of Lagan, Tanith Lee, George R. R. Martin's Fever Dream, great book. First edition that. These are nearly all pretty much first. Bit of Malmsberg. And then the Moorcocks, you can see all the Moorcocks in my Moorcock videos. They're all in there, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. And as you see, because I go by format in my shelving, you don't see the up and down. It's purely for space reasons more than anything else. Plus I've grown accustomed to it and I like the neatness and what have you. So even though I've got the other books in the Earthsea trilogy, Earthsea series I should say, in hardcover, at least the first 3, they're not kept there because they're smaller format and they're tucked away. So, you know, it's all about fitting in what you can. Right, we're going low now with shelf 4, front level. And we've got all sorts of things here, actually. A lot of nice stuff. These are essays. They are in alphabetical order, but I mean, sometimes the other part of the alphabet is behind it. There is logic there, believe you me, but it's a logic which only I can understand. And, you know, if I ever live in somewhere that's big enough to have everything shelved up, then everything will be pristine and in order and what have you. My books, I tend to keep them, obviously A to Z by author, left to right as you read, strict alphabet. none of this messing around. And I tend to go with publication order where I can remember it. Sometimes things drift, but I do tend to go for that, so I just have to adjust something there. So yeah, a bit of Ness for Cordwainer Smith. I have some Ness for stuff on order at the moment. Actually, I do love their books. They're fantastic. The Machine by James Smythe. One of the better SF writers in Britain of recent years. He's done some YA stuff. He's had quite a bit of acclaim. I got this for 50p in a charity shop in, where was it? Warminster or Westbury? It was Warminster. Place is full of charity shops. And I'd already read it in a paperback. I bought the paperback, so he got some royalties, which was good. So rather like Frankenstein. Very, very good book. So there you go. Bit of Spinrad, Children of Hamelin, Bruce Sterling. There we go. Do like Bruce. Century, this is 80s. Islands in the Net. Look at that, isn't that lovely? I remember selling this as a trade paperback at the time. Absolutely beautiful. Great stuff. He's done some great work, Bruce. He really has. And this is Crystal Express, which is short stories. In Legend, which was the Hutchinson Arrow SF imprint. Legend's still around? I think it is. I'm not sure. So we'll just zoom in a bit. Michael Swanick. Here's something which I know Matt Defoe's keen on this. And you don't hear so much about Swanick now, but you know, back in the day, he used to win tons of awards. He was really popular. This is Vacuum Flowers, Arbor House, which some people say is late cyberpunk. Yeah, I suppose it is. Yeah, you know, it's got the sort of AI concerns and all that, but what a jacket. They don't make them like that anymore, do they? It's fantastic. And some of his other work here in The Drift. Again, memories of selling this in trade paperback. This is the Legend hardcover. What would happen with these sort of books is they do maybe 1,000 in hardback for the libraries and the hardcore fans, and what you'd get in your bookshop would be the trade paperback, because people were buying trades then because they were a good alternative. They came out either 3 months after or at the same time as the hardcover from the same text block printing, and you didn't have to wait a year for the sort of A or B format to come out, so they were a handy mid-price alternative. Trade paperbacks are very expensive now, I think, so they kind of gradually are fading away. Peter Tate, the Welsh SF writer, there's some of his work there. And this is an odd fantasy novel. I bought this purely for nostalgia reasons because, again, it's a book I remember selling. Raven of Destiny. Peter Tremaine has written all sorts of things, sword and sorcery, crime. I think he's still active. He must be ancient. Lots of crime things. I think it's the Sister Fidela things about a nun who's a detective or something like that. Not my sort of bag, but really beautiful. And I got that a while ago, and that's Methuen. Which I think is pretty much a defunct imprint these days. So there you go. Bit of Jack Vance there. Alastor trilogy. Kugel Saga. That's a Timescape first edition of Kugel Saga. And then we got some Vonnegut in Cape. You know, just beautiful stuff. You know, you just love Vonnegut. Really, really lovely Cape books. Look at that. Tone text block. Nice plain livery. You can't go wrong with Cape. I signed that one actually, so there you go. Never met him, but very good. The secret with Vonnegut is not to read too much, because it's a bit like cake. You just want a little bit. If you have too much, it sort of gets you sick to your stomach. You know, it's not really somebody you sort of want to binge. I've binged him twice and it was a bad idea, and I came out really disliking some of the books. I would say he's a great writer, but he is undisciplined at times. I mean, you can't really go wrong with Slaughterhouse-5. It's some of these later ones are not quite so good, but the early SF novels are all well worth reading and fantastic. He drifts a bit later on. I think I've read all of his novels apart from, I think it's Hocus Pocus is the only one I've never read. Somebody I'm really keen on, he's dead now sadly, Donald E. Westlake, also known as Richard Stark, also known as Tucker Coe. There were other pseudonyms as well. He wrote 100 novels. He was fundamentally a crime novelist. He wrote some SF as well. And this is Anna Chaos in Seven House. And Anna Chaos is a crime novel set, it's an SF novel, but with a crime conceit. It's about a criminal who is sent to a planet where there's basically no law. And, you know, it's good fun. It's a bit of a romp. I think Westlake really wrote SF just to sort of, you know, make some money. There's a collection called Tomorrow's Crimes, which is quite hard to find. This is probably quite hard to find. He's one of my favourite writers. His Parker thrillers are just the best heist novels ever. Just amazing. So I'm a big fan of him. I've read probably about 40 of his books out of the hundreds. There's plenty more to go. Colin Wilson, another of my favourite writers. I'm going to do a video at some point about his SF because his SF is underrated. Robert Charles Wilson. And there's some Gene Wolfes there. Soda in the Mist, Soda Over 8, Free Live Free, and There Are Doors. I'll show you this There Are Doors. I acquired this last year and really, really lovely. This is Tor. It's a Tor hardcover first. Look at that. Beautiful. I love that title. In the UK, that was a Gollancz Yellow Jacket, but it was one of the later ones, a bit like this Philip K. Dick I showed you earlier on. And not very attractive book, but absolutely beautiful. But yeah, Gene Wolfe, good stuff. Very enigmatic Wolfe, isn't he? Really is. It's hard to know sometimes what he's on about, but it's always a pleasure to read him. A bit of ephemera. There's a Keith Roberts chapbook from Kerosena, Irish Encounters in paperback. A Philip K. Dick chapbook, The Slave Race, a very early story. A Morrigan chapbook of The Event by Keith Roberts, which is a wonderful story. And it's about a wall falling over in a garden. I kid you not, it is about a wall falling over in a garden, and it's absolutely brilliant. There's no human characters. It's fantastic. Just never anything like it, and I love it. It's such a great story. And what else have we got? We got another Kerosena chapbook. It's Katie's Apocalypse. Isn't that lovely? And there's another one, The Natural History of the pH by Keith Roberts, with a collaboration from Robert Holdstock. Nice Mucha styled Art Deco there. That's how you do collectible limited edition stuff. You don't mess around. A children's book by Robert Nye. Who's Robert Nye, you ask yourself? Well, we'll cover that again at another time. And my favourite book thus far by Lavi Tidhar, the Israeli SF writer, Osama, which is an alternate world novel set in an Earth where there's no terrorism, and Osama bin Laden is a pulp hero in a series of novels, and it goes on from there. Doesn't quite fulfill expectations, and that's the thing I find with Lavi. He has great ideas, but he doesn't always take them anywhere that I find that interesting, but well worth a look. And that's from PS, of course, wonderful small press publisher, do some excellent work. So having got those things out of the way, well, I mean, it's Moorcock. I mean, if you've watched my Moorcock videos, you'll have seen these. These will be in the sort of Demy section. And what have we got here? Horror of Horrors. There's Larry Niven next to Michael Moorcock. Mike would be shocked. That's Legacy of Hero. Of course, it's a reference to Beowulf. And I picked it up a while ago. And I mean, mostly with these, I've got them because of the associations. I used to sell a lot of these things, you see. And I used to enjoy sort of stacking them up and selling them. I'm not particularly a fan of Niven and Pornell. Stephen Barnes, of course, who's a black SF writer. Black SF writer you never hear about. Yet he's written about 20 odd books. How come nobody ever goes on about Stephen Barnes? Quite hard to find his singletons. I'd like to sort of read some someday. But I think most of them have never been published over here, only the collaborative novels. So there you go. And a few years ago, I was selling this on import all the time. This is Logan's Run. By William F. Nolan and George Clayton Johnson. Marvellous, sharp, astringent, hard and fast, different to the film, different to the TV series. It's rather a flavour of early ballad in some ways in the way it's sort of written. And this is faux leather. And I was selling this, I was importing it. And how much was it? It was quite a lot of money. We couldn't sell it cheap. It was going for up to about 30 quid, and I was selling it all the time because nobody had ever seen it. Because what? Logan's Run? Really? A novel? Yes, it was, and there are 2 sequels as well. There you go. So what else have we got? Now, I mentioned Robert Nye a few seconds ago, didn't I? And this is a wonderful book. Robert Nye was basically a poet and critic, and he wrote fiction as well. And he used to do this thing where he did metafiction. He wrote fiction about other fictional characters, other people's fictional characters. And this is Merlin, which is an Arthurian novel, as you might suspect. And it's a first. It's Hamish Hamilton. Look at that jacket. And this book is so funny. It's written in short, sharp, witty sentences. It's very visceral. And, you know, he's not afraid of smells and tastes and what have you. And it's very, very irreverent, and I love it. So if you ever see it, it was a penguin, pick it up. If you like Arthurian stuff, it'll really float your boat because it's an alternate take. And it's a great, great one. One of my favourite fantasy novels of all time, I would say. Bit of Chris Priest there in Doctrinaire, The Glamour. Probably the novel which affected me the most in my life in its first edition. Though it is the second edition with a revised text, which is the Abacus paperback. And of course the term edition refers to content, not printing, anything like that. So this is the Cape first edition. When it appeared in paperback, it was a second edition because it was revised, and that I think is the best text. There are 4 different texts of the Glamour, and I'm going to talk about that when I do my Priest in the 80s video, which is upcoming. Let's see what else we've got. 1984 in a critical edition. Jeremy Reed's Diamond Nebula. Interview with the Vampire Anne Rice. That is actually a book club one. It's not the original. Adam Roberts' Black Prince, which is a very sort of modernist historical novel based on a screenplay that was never finished and never filmed by Anthony Burgess. And that's probably one of Adam's most, how can I put it, most experimental. It reminded me of Donald Barthelme's book, The King, a lot, which is a sort of postmodern Arthurian novel. The Boat of Fate by Keith Roberts. I'm way behind on my plans to film a Keith video, and it's because I want to do it outside, and I need to go to a location, but to go there when it's quiet, because it's a beautiful location. I want to film there when there's nobody around in the right weather, and it's hard to sort of get there, to go like 6 o'clock in the morning or something. This is a historical novel of the Roman Empire, and this Hutchinson First. It's much easier to find this than the NEL Hodgson Stoughton paperback, which is an A format, and I've only ever seen 1 copy of. That's really, really uncommon. The hardcover first is much more common. And I talked Ben Kane, who's a Roman historical novelist. He used to be a vet. He does these sort of blood and thunder things, into reading that, and he thought it was absolutely brilliant. And he said it was one of the best Roman sort of themed novels he'd ever read. And there's some more Keith. There's other stuff on the top here. Letters from Chris Priest. M. John Harrison Climbers Press Pack. Some more Moorcock omnibuses, other bits and pieces there. Desmond Morris's fantasy novel In Rock, which I think Matt Defoe managed to get one of those recently. Very interesting stuff. And a bit of Kim Stanley Robinson. Look at that, a bit of Kim. Wow, who'd have thought? One of the early ones. My fondness is for the early ones. That's Memory of Whiteness and MacDonald hardcover first. There you go. I'm not really keen on these big brick things he does, so I like the sort of early ones. They have their flaws, but they have their charms as well. That's that one there. And you see there's a bit of Sheckley there in the corner, Damocles, and 2 of the Hunter series, and the Time Hoppers by Silverberg. There you go, all classic stuff. Well, we're coming to the home stretch for this bookcase of Demy's, and in the front a lot of these are royal. So this is the front level, and this is miscellaneous stuff really, and as you can see, Complete Conan, a bit of George Orwell there. These are Seca ones. These were reissues from 1984, and they were all reissued, and I do love Orwell a lot. Really great stuff. Harper Cloth 451, which has been around for a few years, is now the standard edition. Very, very nice. And a couple of sort of big things there from Barnes & Noble Leather. I do like Barnes & Noble stuff. Hard to get now in the UK. Would like more of them. And some Oxford cloth bound sort of classics there. M.R. James and Arthur Machen. I sold tons of this a few Christmases ago when it came out, and I basically wrote a little recommendation underneath it that said the Welsh Lovecraft, and I sold loads and loads and loads, dozens. And you know, it just goes to show that people want to try different horror fiction they haven't heard of. Machen, of course, the great Welsh horror writer. There's a video on the channel where I go to visit his birthplace, which is a house painted bright pink in Carleon. Bit of William Burroughs there, associational stuff. Bit of Colin Wilson, Patricia Highsmith, the odd Cormac McCarthy, and some of the original SF Masterworks hardcovers. Haldeman, Herbert, Lagan and Wyndham, Day of the Triffids. And I did have more of these. I used to have, I think the High Castle one, which I got rid of, and I also had Canticle for Leibowitz, which was damaged, so I moved it on. There's Day of the Triffids. These are all like worth about £100 now, because of course they like had one printing mostly, and that was like 20 odd years ago. So, but they're really nice. They should bring them back. They're much nicer than the laminated board stuff they do. And on the top, what have we got? We got a bit of Italian crime. Massimo Carlotto, Giancarlo de Cataldo. I'm a big fan of Italian crime fiction, contemporary, and those are mostly in Europa editions. Wonderful publisher. Some Jake Arnott proofs there, featuring original text which are altered pre-publication. I tend not to hang on to proofs with Jake's work because it gets altered. I tend to. There we go. Okay, the background, I think you've seen most of these again from my Moorcock videos, but I know I haven't shown these Millennium ones. I mean, this is why there's the gap. The ones I show at the beginning, and these are Royals down here rather than Demys, they're larger format, is as I say, because I'm thinking of moving them on, replacing them with different editions. So I really don't like these editions. I don't like the artwork. I really never liked them. Yeah, I've had them for 30 years, but I mean, this Von Beck one, I've got all the contents of this and other things, but I think I've hung on to this because there's a sort of great dedication from Mike in 11th of November 92. Look at that, and Jerusalem Commands bookmark and what have you. And let's say I'm sure I've shown this in one of the Moorcock videos, but I really don't like these editions, and I've got loads of them in other things. I mean, like I don't have copies of Eternal Champion and Phoenix and Obsidian. I used to have old Mayflower ones back in the day, and I think I need to replace them, but it's nice to have these in hardcover, so maybe I'll track down. I thought I was done with collecting Moorcock, but you know, once you get on the Moorcock bandwagon, you're there forever. And there's Hawkmoon and Oswald Bastable. I mean, I'd really like the Doubleday Book Club edition of this, the American one, which is nice. But of course they have different texts and things, they get changed, so there you go. So this is mostly Moorcock along here, and I think I've shown all of these. These are all first, they're nearly all signed from the times we met, what have you. And it's all great stuff. What have we got on here? Comet in Moomin Land, which I think is in 100 Must-Read Science Fiction Novels. The thing is with these is when you read them as an adult, you realise how eldritch and strange they are. But no, it's in 100 Must-Read Fantasy Novels, I think. Great stuff. And they've been repackaged all the time, you know, they're really good. There's a Mick Heron there, the one that nobody realises is part of the Slough House series, and it's called Nobody Walks. That's a first, that's signed. And this was the last Jerry Cornelius book to appear, Peg and the President, and that's PS. And I really felt he was going through the motions on that one. I didn't like it. So I think that's pretty much it for this shelf tour. So I've got to put everything back now. And am I in the mood to do the Royals as well? Well, I guess you'll have to see. This has felt like a much shorter shoot than shooting the Octavos in the corner, so I guess we'll find out. But you know, I hope you enjoy that. Any questions, comments, as ever. And as you can see, it's all about the good stuff. It's all about, you know, cherry picking. And there is some nostalgia collecting in here, but most of this stuff is authors I really revere and I've followed for a long time, and to me are the sort of core things. You'll notice there's a marked absence of people like Banks, Hamilton, Baxter and Reynolds, because there is more to SF than just space opera. So this is Outlaw Bookseller. I'm probably signing out now. Well, hang on, we got any other stuff under here? Yes, we have. Look at that. What we got? We got Hubert Selby, William Burroughs Jr., Charles Willeford, George Orwell, John Reschy. Some of my mainstream stuff is still in there. That's the way it is in this house. Stuff is just tucked away everywhere.